All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, when Chris Paul walked off the floor last night after the Phoenix Suns were eliminated from the NBA playoffs at the hands of the Dallas Mavericks, it was another chapter in a long line of postseason disappointments for the future Hall of Famer. Now, the Suns finished the regular season with the best record in the NBA. And for CP3 and Phoenix, they were seeking to get back to the NBA Finals for a second consecutive year. However, Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks had something else in mind as they ran the Suns off of the floor on their own home court last night. As at one point we saw Dallas up 57 to 27 at the half as they cruised to the 123 to 90 victory. Now, for the second consecutive year, the Suns have lost a playoff series where they won the first two contests of that series. Last year in the NBA Finals, we saw Phoenix win the first two against the Milwaukee Bucks before they proceeded to lose the next four. This time around, Dallas came back in game three and four at home, and they won. Phoenix won game five at home, and then Dallas took the last two contests of the series. But for Chris Paul, this also marks the fifth time in his playoff career that his team was up 2 games to nothing in a series, and they still went on to lose. And this is just a long line of playoff disappointments for CP3, some that stand out. You go back to the 2015 Western Conference semis, where as a member of the Los Angeles Clippers, Paul and his teammates had a 3-1 lead in the series over the Houston Rockets before they lost the next three. You go back to the 2021 NBA Finals last year where the Suns were rolling, but then the Milwaukee Bucks made the necessary adjustments to come back and win the next four. And then, of course, this series right here versus Dallas. Now, for Chris Paul, he's done everything that an individual can do in the league, with the exception of being an MVP. You think about it, double digits as far as times that he's made the All Star game MVP, been numerous times being a member of the first team All Defense team, leading the league in steals and assists. And you think about a guy that, alongside LeBron James, both of these guys are the only guys that have 20,000 points and 10,000 career assists. And you think about some of the greats that have ever done it. But yeah, so Stephen A, how you doing? Mr. Afif Ahmed, thank you so much for the support. And Stephen A, you are 100% right about Philly going to lose. And it's one of those I touched on it the other night, where plain and simple, Miami bullied them. That was good old fashioned bully ball. And um, we saw Miami make that adjustment after game number four, and they really hunkered down on the defensive end. And of course, with that said, James Harden did what James Harden normally does as far as checking out. And with that said, this is another guy right here in CP3 who has had his fair share of struggles in the postseason as well. So it's kind of like take your pick as far as who's had more polarizing struggles in the playoffs. And of course, then we saw Chris Paul and James Harden be teammates briefly with the Houston Rockets. And that goes back to 2018. And of course, the Rockets were up 3-2 on the Warriors in the Western Conference Finals. Then Chris Paul suffered a hamstring injury. He was unavailable for games 6 and 7 in that series. We saw the Warriors come back, and the rest was history. And you could make the case that might have been Chris Paul's best chance to get a championship, because we saw that Warriors team go on to sweep the Cleveland Cavaliers, led by LeBron James, in the finals that year. And you're just left to wonder what could have been for the Rockets on that squad. And we've seen so many guys from that team go their separate ways and do their thing. We saw PJ Tucker get a championship last year with the Milwaukee Bucks. He's got a very good shot this year with the Miami Heat as well. Clint Capella going to the Hawks. Chris Paul, continuing to play out his career. But nonetheless, it just gives you an idea of how close things were for uh, that team with the Rockets a couple of years ago. But for CP3, he turned 37 years of age earlier this month. And for me, it's one of those, how many more opportunities is he going to get? I mean, you look at it, it's one of those, is he one of the better point guards of all time? Absolutely. Has he frustrated some of his teammates and opponents along the way? Absolutely. But nonetheless, sometimes for some players, as great as they are, it's simply not in the cards for them to win a championship. And I think it's high time that we put Chris Paul in that category. It's a situation where, you know what, you've been there so often, you've had so many opportunities, and you look at it as a whole. When you have that opportunity to seize that moment, you got to go out there and get it. You look at Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks. They finally broke through last year, and Giannis rallied his team. And I know, a lot of things could have been different for the Bucks right now had Chris Middleton not been injured. But you know what? We can't. We'll never know. But nonetheless, Giannis and the Bucks seized that moment last year. And for me, it's so difficult when you get so close to try to come back and do it again. And we saw that from the Suns with Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and they were rolling throughout the season. They dealt with the adversity in the form of the Dallas Mavericks, and they never were able to overcome it. And for the Suns team, contractually, you're in a good spot with everybody right now. You have them under contract, your key players, and there's rumors that Devin Booker's probably going to get a super max deal soon. But at the end of the day, is it like, do you really think the Suns are going to come back? I mean, I look at DeAndre Ayton. He's a restricted free agent, but I really feel that there's going to be a team out there that goes out there and tries to overpay DeAndre Ayton. And the thing is, DeAndre Ayton and Devin Booker, to me, as good as Devin Booker is as a scorer, he really benefits from playing alongside Chris Paul. Because when you look at it, aside from scoring, what does Devin Booker bring to the table? And a guy like DeAndre Ayton really feeds off of having Chris Paul out there. So if you let Ayton go, he's not going to be the same player. Might be, a little bit, heavier in the wallet, so to say, from getting a big payday, but he's not going to be the same player. So I think it's important, number one, to keep Chris Paul, but then also see what you do around that. You know, Stephen A chimes in and he says if Philadelphia wants to win, they should not resign James Harden. He's a shell of himself, and they would be stupid to give him a max contract. Stephen A, I'll tell you like this: if anybody gives James Harden a max contract, therefore. And 'cause I talked about this the other day, and it's a situation where the days of guys like James Harden and Russell Westbrook getting max deals are over. James Harden's a complimentary player at this point, but then on top of that, we've seen so much of the narrative from him as far as not being able to show up in those clutch moments in the playoffs. Pick your poison with the Oklahoma City Thunder in the NBA Finals when they lost to the Miami Heat. Numerous years with the Houston Rockets. We saw it last year in the Brooklyn with the Brooklyn Nets in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Semis against the Bucks. We saw it primarily throughout this series against the Miami Heat, and I said it. When the trade went down for Ben Simmons, it's one of those where I just reserve judgment because at some point Philly was going to need James Harden to win a game, and he couldn't do it. And we saw that uh, in this past series with Miami. And again, you put guys like that um, and, Chris Paul in that category. They can't get it done in the postseason. And more than likely, they're going to be players who, in their Hall of Fame careers without getting a championship. To me, pick your poison as far as, or take your pick rather, which years were probably the most ideal for Chris Paul to get a championship. Last year, the Suns were rolling. I mean, we saw them, go through the Lakers early on in the playoffs like gangbusters. We saw them mow down so many opponents in the Western playoffs until they got to the NBA Finals, and then the Bucks played bully ball on them. We saw them get punched in the mouth after game 2 in this series with the Mavericks, and they never recovered. So I mean, I look at it right now. Chris Paul, he's always going to be thought of as one of the great point guards that has ever played the game. He's a member of the NBA's all-time 75th anniversary team, rightfully so. Top 5 in assists, more than 20,000 career points. But at the end of the day, with all of those accolades, it's always going to be that yeah, but Stephen A asked or chimes in rather, if I was in B, I would ask to be traded. And I've talked about this for the past couple of months. The Sixers are definitely wasting the prime years of Joel Embiid, and I thought it was a waste of a trade to get James Harden. There were better trades on the table for the Sixers, but Daryl Morey unfortunately had his heart set on getting a quote unquote star, and he got a star, but a star that is faded. So, like I said, James Harden and CP3, they're in that same category. If you're the Suns, you have to be wary of a potential hangover going into next season, because that was a bitter pill to swallow for Phoenix. Getting punched in the mouth like that at home, 20 held at 27 points at the half. That's something that you would expect from a college team, not an NBA team, especially an NBA team like the Suns that is capable, because they've done it before, of scoring 40 points in one quarter. So you'd have to wonder if there's going to be a hangover for this team heading into next season. We'll have to wait and see. But nonetheless, the expectations were high for the Suns, and they simply, fizzled out. Stephen A, I think we won that trade with Philadelphia because we got more back besides getting Ben Simmons, and he just went under surgery for herniated disc. And I do think he will heal and will be better. Uh, for me, as soon as I saw the trade going down with Ben Simmons to the Nets for James Harden, of course, those were like the two primary pieces of that trade. I basically said, cue the Spider Man meme, because to me, Ben Simmons is a guy, I don't know if we're ever really going to see him live up truly to his full potential. That's the biggest thing about it. Uh, and I think he'll be motivated partially to prove the Sixers wrong when he eventually suits up for the Nets. But I don't think he's going to be ever a guy that fully, lives up to his potential. And I think the thing is, Daryl Morey was hoping to get the James Harden that we saw in Houston in his prime. That James Harden's done. And to your point, Stephen A, the Sixers did get some first round picks back as well. And, if you're an NBA team, you're always willing to do business with the Brooklyn Nets. And the reason for that is because the Nets are always willing to part with picks. You think about what they did to get a washed up Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce from the Boston Celtics. They gave up 3 first round picks. Two of those turned out to be Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum, and then of course the other pick was traded to Cleveland to acquire Kyrie Irving, and that pick turned out to be Colin Sexton. And now the Nets are turning around and giving the Sixers more picks right here. So if history holds serve, the Sixers should find themselves in position to retool their roster in the coming years. We'll have to wait and see, but nonetheless, for Chris Paul and the Suns, a bitter pill to swallow, a tough way for their season to end. And let's see if they can rally the troops and find a way to come back next year. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take the time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Also, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out, drop a line, and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. Definitely want to take this time to thank Afif Ahmed for chiming in the comments. Definitely appreciate the support, and to Stephen A as well. Stephen A, I know that you're a diehard Philly fan, and I know you got some love for the Mets as well. So I just want to know how you feel about the Steelers jersey in the background there, as well as the Atlanta Braves jersey as well. I want to get I want to get your thoughts real quick on that to see what you have to say. But nonetheless, I want to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. Once again, this is William Martin signing off, saying take care, have a wonderful day, and thanks for tuning in once again to the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge show here on YouTube. Okay, very quickly. Stephen A says, no, I am not a diehard Philly fan. I'm a diehard Mets fan. Okay, you know what? Fair enough. But so like definitely, if you're a Mets fan, you definitely have some ill feelings about the probably have some ill feelings about the Braves jersey in the background. I just try to rotate them. But for nonetheless, folks, thanks again. Have a good one, and thanks for chiming in. Be well.